Good evening, everybody, and it's so wonderful to have you all here for Sisters in Crime. I know this evening's probably been the thing you've been most looking forward to all year. So we're so excited tonight to have, to welcome you tonight to Twisted Plots with a Cracking Pace, and it's fantastic to see so many of you here tonight. Please welcome our panel. We have Vikki Wakefield, Fiona Lowe and Christine Gregory, who, like me, are on a mission to breathe new life into rural noir. At the outset, on behalf of Sisters in Crime Australia, we respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to the land and the sea. Thank you. I'm going to tell you a bit now about how this evening will work. And firstly, you might like to shuffle your seats around so you're looking right here at our four fabulous faces. And I will be in conversation with you and the three panellists for about an hour. We'll then break for drinks, book buying, book signing, and the traditional Sisters in Crime raffle, which is always highly exciting and sometimes a bit contentious. There are lots of books from the Sun Bookshop available for signing. Our fabulous Sun Bookshop up there. We'll have a wave with our clap for the Sun Bookshop. We love the Sun Bookshop. They are long-term supporters of Sisters in Crime, and best of all, they offer a 10% discount for Sisters in Crime members. We just love them. Indie bookshop owners really are the best people in the universe. I think we all agree with that. In the second half, we'll resume for the raffle, draw, questions and a prize. For the best question, as judged by Sarah Hood. Where are you, Sarah? Sarah. Sarah has returned from her gap year and has rejoined us a convener. Please give Sarah a clap. After all this, we're going to be heading downstairs for drinks and for some criminal fun. Please feel free to join us. Who knows how the evening might end. And now to introduce this panel. We're delighted to welcome Vikki Wakefield, a Sisters in Crime member all the way from Adelaide. Yay! Good effort. Vikki has written two thrillers, After You Were Gone, which was published in 2022 to much acclaim. Her latest book is To the River, out with Text, and we have Penny here from Text. Vikki also writes fiction for adults and young adults. Her novels have been shortlisted for numerous awards. Up from Geelong is Sisters in Crime member Fiona Lowe, whose career as a midwife, sexual health counsellor and a family support worker have provided the storylines for 37 novels. Yes? I mean, that just baffles me. 37 novels. And she's only a spring chicken. I can't work that out. Fiona is a recipient of the prestigious USA Rita Award and the Australian Ruby Award for romance writing. Her books are set in small country towns and feature people facing tough choices and explore how family ties impact their decisions. Her latest novel, The Accident, out with HQ Fiction, is no exception. And Christine Gregory, this is a really wonderful one, because Christine Gregory is a Melbourne member. She's a former international aid worker and now works as a director in a national non-for-profit working on the prevention of violence against women and children. An earlier version of The Community was shortlisted for the Banjo Prize. Christine has previously been shortlisted with Sisters in Crime Stiletto Awards, and I think it's really wonderful, and we really have to pay a big credit to Christine here, because this is her debut novel and her book. She hasn't even had the launch for her book yet. So we are very lucky. Well done, Christine. And now I'm going to begin, because when I read these books, and sometimes when you're a panellist, it's really tricky because you can get books that you're asked to read and sometimes you don't like them and it's really awful. And sometimes I get them, I go, oh, please, well, I like this book. And fortunately, I didn't only like them, I loved all 3 of these books, so much so that I went back and read them again and again and read parts of them. Even on the way here while I was walking, I was reading them and I nearly got run over by some bloke at a Tirana. I want to first of all start by talking, and I think it's a nice little segue into, as we're talking about rural crime, is to talk about the setting, the rural settings. And I'd just like each of our panellists, please, to talk about where they set their novels and why. Can we start with you, Vikki, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me here. My books are, well, To the River is set in a remote mining town and also on the moon. No, on the river. It's set on the river, and it's based on the Murray River, which, as you know, is Australia's longest river, and it's quite a meandering waterway. Struck me as a great place to hide if you were a fugitive, and that's what this story is about. Someone who's been hiding on the river for many years and is about to face a reckoning.
So, Vikki, with the houseboats, was there a particular place on the Murray that you were thinking of when you wrote this? Because I couldn't quite pick. I mean, was it Echuca?
No, technically it's between Swan Reach and Nildotty for anyone who knows Murray River in South Australia. So there are some very real landmarks in this book, but I've actually tried to keep it fairly, I don't name the places so that I can...
Possibly wise in crime fiction.
Yeah. It just makes it, it makes it better to make things up and it keeps you out of trouble with the locals.
That's right. Thank you. Fiona. We go to Western Australia in the wheat belt.
We do. It's lovely to be here, thank you. And when I was reading Vikki's novel, we've had 3 wonderful family holidays in houseboats on the Murray River, and it took me back there. All those pelicans and the sunrises. So yeah, I loved it. If you've read any of my more recent novels, they're all set in Victoria. So why is this one set in the wheat belt? And the reason I set it in Victoria is because there is a lot about write what you know, and I know about the flora and fauna of Victoria, but we were on a post-COVID holiday in WA, and we drove through, we'd come up from Esperance, we were going diagonally back to Perth because I wanted to go to Wave Rock, because, when I was 6 I saw it in National Geographic and I always wanted to go. So, and we drove through York. And York's in the wheat belt, and I am an absolute sucker for a Victorian building. If there's normally one that features, although not in this book. And I fell in love. I ran around and took photos, and I thought, you know what, this would really work for a setting for the next book, because I needed isolation, and in WA, isolation is in spades, whereas I guess you can get it in the northwest of Victoria. So I thought that'd be great. And so I took a few photos and then settled down to write the book and went, I don't know anything about Western Australia's flora and fauna. I had to join the Avon Valley Gardeners Facebook group because it's so dry. I'm from the southwest of Victoria. We get a lot of rain. Well, not this year, but normally we get quite a bit of rain. So, yes, it came with quite a few challenges, and it also came with challenges for language. So you move states, it's not necessarily easy.
Thank you. Christine.
I've forgotten the question. It was why and setting. Where and why.
So setting, if you could tell us a bit about your setting and why you placed your story there.
So the community is, it's set in a fictitious community called Steele's Creek. But if you read the book and read the acknowledgements, I do acknowledge that it is based on a real place called the Starlight Community, which is Australia's second oldest commune after Tunderville Falls in Nimbin. And there is another town which backs onto my community called Hopeville, which is loosely based on the town of Yandina, which is the closest town to Starlight. So the reason why I said it there was when I was a university student many moons ago, I actually met somebody who lived on the Starlight community in a pub, and he invited me to come up and stay there and to visit him there, and so I did, and we ended up becoming friends, and I used to go and stay there sometimes, periodically, usually with somebody else as my wing woman, because, you know, he was an older man, and God knows, I mean, I know, you know, what he was interested in, but anyway, it was fine. Once he realised that I wasn't...
That's for a different panel.
Once I wasn't coming to the party, we actually became good friends. It really, it had such a impact on me, I guess, the environment. I always thought, oh, it would be great to set a book there. And when I was originally starting writing this, it wasn't a crime novel at all. I was writing some sort of intergenerational family drama is what it was starting out to be. And then in a creative writing class, I wrote the opening scene where there's a hunter walking through the forest trapping foxes at dawn, and he stumbles on a body. And as soon as I wrote it, I knew, okay, it's this community, and this is actually what I'm writing. Yep.
Terrific. You've actually given me a really nice segue there, Christine, talking about an intergenerational family drama, because when I first read these three books, and I mentioned this to Vikki when we first met tonight, I was struck by how strong the characters are and how character-driven these books are. I really do feel that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that these were very character-driven plots. And I was interested in many things about the characters, and one was parenthood, the notion of parenthood, and you all have very different families in these novels. You know, we've got Sabine and Pop, Lars and Annika, Ryan and Freya and Mia. There's different times of families, and different things are happening. The dynamics switch and change in these books, and I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about these characters and what these characters meant for you to write them. Fiona, can we start with you with this one? Okay. So a bit about your characters, the family dynamics, and what they were meaning to you when you were writing them.
So with the accident, there's a few overarching themes, but one of them is motherhood. And I wanted to explore, do women in the 2020s really have a choice today about motherhood? And I really don't think they do. I think between societal expectations and family expectations, the pressure to have children is enormous. And it takes a very brave woman to say she doesn't want to have a child. And I also wanted to explore, how far will someone go to have a child, and when does that desire to have a child intersect with the rights of the child? So that was my theme. So I came up with, so I needed two women, and I needed them to be connected. So the book features two couples that have been best friends for a very long time, and they're excited about their future. I gave Freya a mother and a sister. I think it depends on your plot. Sometimes your characters need to have no family because that's important for them, but I needed to embed Freya and Hannah with an inordinate amount of family and community, so that there were a lot of opinions to explore the issues that I wanted to tackle, which was about motherhood.
Terrific. So your characters were sort of derived from this theme that you really wanted to explore.
Yeah, I was laughing today because my husband has just endured 19 book talks for when I was out on the road and for the accident, and I said I always start with theme, and for the last 8 books that is absolutely absolutely correct. I start with a theme, which is a social issue, and then I create my characters around that. But the book that I have just started, which will be out in 2026, starts with a dead body, and there's no actual theme. I'm just looking at a really messy family.
Great, I like it. Sounds good. Chaotic. Vikki, what about you?
I love hearing about other writers' process and the way you just told us how that book came to be. I don't think I start with anything other than a very vivid scene that for some reason comes to mind. And in the case of Mothers and Daughters, that was Dee and Sabine. So I have in To the River is dual timeline. So we go back in time with Sabine as a 17-year-old, and then again 12 years later when she's almost about to turn 30 and has been on the run for 12 years for the murders of 9 people in a caravan park. Yeah, she's got a lot on her plate. But she also had a pretty an upbringing that was challenging, shall we say. So one thing that I think we have all written character-driven books, and mine are very much about the question of why are we who we are? How did we become that way? And that's where I spin off into backstory, and suddenly I've created a world in my head that feels very real to me, and characters who I can see, and speak to me in opportune times. This about the family thing. I think all of my books in some way are about family and about those connections and why we become who we are, and in this case, how do you become a murderer?
Christine?
I can relate to that very much, Vikki, and I think most of my writing does start with character, which is not always the case with crime writing. A lot of people do start with plot, I think, very plot-driven, whereas, the plot is important, but it all starts with the characters for me. And this book started with the character of Lars as the first character that was very strong in my mind. So it sort of is his story, although it's quite a big cast of characters, this book, and there are other people who feature heavily, and he's not the only point of view character. But it is his story, and that theme around relationships between fathers and their children was very strong in my mind when I was writing this. A lot has been written about the experience of motherhood, which I'm very drawn to that myself, being a mother and relating to those stories. But for some reason, I was drawn in this book to really be looking at the relationship between fathers and their children and the different manifestations of that. So there's a lot of fathers and children in this book. Some of those relationships are less positive than others, and also some of them portray on the face of it that they are very functional relationships, when in fact, as we go into the book, we find that they're not. I don't know why I'm drawn to the family dynamics. I guess it's, if you want to understand a character and their motivations, then family is always the best place to start, because it's both the cause of all of our neuroses and where we all started, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to read books with terrific characters, strong characters, these 3 books certainly are it. And you've also raised something else. I want to read a quote from To the River. There's justice for the powerful and there's justice for the powerless, she says. If you don't know the difference, Rachel, it means you're powerful. That's Sabine in Vikki's To the River. And I wanted to talk about class, because in these 3 books, it's really palpable, the difference between the powerful and the powerless, and who is able to speak and who isn't. And that's something that I feel has been kind of lacking in Australian fiction of late, that depiction of class, that real acknowledgement. of another world that's right there in front of us, if you like. Where I am in Beechworth, for example, it's a very beautiful town, but there's only 10 kilometres down the road near the creek near my house, there's tents starting to be piled up of people living there. And that really resonated with me with your caravan park people too, Vikki, when we talk about class. And if you could talk to us a bit about power, notions of power in class in your book, if you can, that would be really terrific. And what you think about, whether you think that that's an important thing we should be considering. Vikki, do you want to talk about that, seeing it was from your quote?
It's funny that I didn't consider that I write about class until very recently, when people have mentioned it before that I do tackle class. I'm just writing what I know. I'm writing about my upbringing. I'm writing about my principles. So if that comes through, then I'm not tackling class as such. I'm just writing a world that I know and understand. So in this book, Sabine has an upbringing she lives in I guess we would call it a trailer park if we had to give it a name, with a drug dealing mother. And she tries to protect her little sister, and there's, lots of bad stuff goes down. There's domestic violence, this kid's up against a fair bit, but in terms of class, I think if that's the way you live and you don't know any different, then you don't talk about class, because that's how it is. But when you bring... when there's friction that arises between people of different classes, and we have a clash of beliefs, and interesting conversations that arise, because I have two female characters in this that are Rachel, who's middle-aged, highly educated, very well off, intelligent, who underestimates an undereducated fugitive. And so we have this push-pull between two very, very different women. So I guess I'm exploring how do they survive together, and how do they come together to find justice.
And can they understand each other? Is it possible in a world that they can both understand each other? I thought that was really interesting in your book.
Yeah, they have to find a way. Does it mean they will be friends? I don't know, but they have to find a way to find justice, but a justice that is equal across the board. I feel it very keenly that justice for the working classes is different than justice for the upper classes. But that's not something I wanted to explore explicitly in this book, but it comes across through the characters anyway.
Yeah, it really does. And Christine, what about yours? Because in your book, there's this real notion of insiders, outsiders, isn't there? Would you like to talk to that?
Yeah, same as Vikki. It's not that I intentionally set out to write a book about class relations. I'm just writing from my experience and what I know, and trying to represent that as best that I can. I could very much relate to the community in the town of Hopeville, which is the more disadvantaged community that is actually sitting on the doorstep of this newer, idealistic, intentional community up the road. And I wanted to show that contrast, I think, and this is, in a lot of places in Australia, this is quite common, where particularly this book is set in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, but if you've spent time in the Northern Rivers in northern New South Wales or around Byron Bay, it's very obvious that there have been these very long established farming communities or working class communities, people that have worked in the mines or they've worked on the plantations, and then industry changes, the area is discovered, and you have these other newer tree change communities that pop up next door. And not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but I guess some of the conflict that can arise out of that I find quite interesting, and I've certainly seen that myself. So this book sort of touches a bit on that, on the conflict between these two communities alongside one another, as well as the insider-outsider thing that happens within the towns themselves. And interestingly, I think people who are working class are very aware of it. You know, if you've grown up working class, you know you are. And there's interactions in this book between the younger characters, the two girls, Amber and Skye, who are best friends. And Amber is very wealthy and comes from money, and her best friend Skye is not. And Skye absolutely recognises this, whereas Amber has no idea. She doesn't know any different. And in the interactions, I think you can see that quite acutely, how insecure that makes Skye feel. So I remember, you know, being that age, and I remember those feelings. So I was sort of tapping into that a bit as well.
Thank you. Fiona, do you have anything? I do. When you asked the question, I was thinking, do I have class in this book? Where I definitely explored it in Daughter of Mine and in A Home Like Ours, when I looked at homelessness and racism against refugees, so they were very clearly class. But I thought about this book, and it's definitely there, and it's there with Hannah's engaged to Jamie, and Jamie's parents are establishment farmers in the wheat belt. So, you know, we have it in the Western District in Geelong, and still very, very relevant in Geelong today.
R.M. William boots are so polished all the time.
Oh, yeah, but, you know, also if you have doctor's sons, the first thing they do when they graduate is they buy themselves R.M. Williams boots, apparently. Anyway, I have 2 pairs of polished RMs at the back door. But that's a whole other story. But, yeah, so Hannah has come, she's moved from Perth to Garingarup, and notice that I made up a town, but if you ever make up a town and it's set in WA, it has to end in up. So Garingarup, and she, for plot purposes, her parents have died. I needed to isolate Hannah, but Jamie's parents are establishment farming, and ultimately they control her with money because something happens, I won't give away the plot, but and Hannah doesn't have a lot of money, and so the parents are more than happy to help, but as it rolls out it becomes very much a controlling thing, you know, and right down to, you know, housing. You know, you can stay in the house as long as. So actually you end up being quite marginalised, and it is absolutely a privileged class issue.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I recognise those farmers. You know, I always think whenever there's a raffle at the pub, I always think, yes, I will buy a raffle ticket for the struggling farmers, but only if their kids don't go to Geelong Grabber. And then
sorry, we're not farmers, but the boys went to.
I do want to talk. We talked a bit about process before, and I find process really interesting too. And I love it when I go to Sisters in Crime talks and the panellists talk about their own process, because we're all so different, aren't we? And you mentioned before about, I think, was it Vikki or Christine that said that you come up, and Fiona said you come up with a theme, and then I think, and you said, Christine, with an image. Is that correct? Or was Vikki? And then, can you talk us through that? How do you manifest a book in the very first instance? And can you give us an example? Not even necessarily with this book, with one of your past books or a future book. Vikki, if you want to have a go.
Well, 2 things, probably that I'm a bit of a daydreamer, so I will just daydream about stuff, but I also got to be mad about something. Something's got to have me thinking. And in the case of To the River, I was trying to think, I've been asked this question a few times, like, now, where does it start? Where does the book start? Honestly, I don't know. but I have to gather enough meat to make the pie, if that makes sense. So I think about things for a really long time before I start writing. I might jot a few things down, but I actually think way longer than I actually write for. And with this book, it was about... I pictured Sabine, and I also was thinking about Lindy Chamberlain and Joanne Lees and Kate McCann, women whose, you know, if their male counterpart was in the media, they would be described as dignified or stoic, or, you know, but the women are cold or calculating, or they're hiding something. And I just thought that tied into my sense of being annoyed about the justice for, you know, that the justice system is different. Like, if you can't, I mean, could you empathise with a murderer if you knew their whole story? Or are we not interested in knowing? And yeah, so I wonder about what happens when we withhold our true self or our grief or anything like that. If we don't share it with the world and we're judged for that, I think women are generally judged pretty harshly.
I was in London at the time when Joanne Lees was going through all of that, and the headline in The Sun was a photo of her, you know, with not crying, not smiling, just with a blank face, and it was cold face, cold heart.
Yeah, I know.
Shocking.
This is, and this happens to Sabine in her own hometown. She has no reaction after something really horrific has happened, and everyone goes straight to murderer. And maybe, and maybe she is, and maybe she isn't. But the town created this girl, you know, and 12 years later she'll have her reckoning.
Terrific, thank you, Christine. What about you?
So, I mean, this book started with, as I said, the characters. So the first scene I actually wrote is a scene that ends up maybe a third of the way into the book, which is Arnica arriving on the train to see her father, Lars, who they haven't seen one another in a while. And I wrote that scene originally from her point of view. And so I had these two characters, father and daughter, and then I created the characters, the neighbours, Joe and Jules, and their daughter Sky, and it was sort of this friendship group. And I was playing around with that, it wasn't going anywhere. And then when I wrote the opening scene, it suddenly sort of unfolded in front of me that these were somehow connected. That being said, it didn't all unfold as in the plot. I had no idea, to be honest. It's a bit of a nightmare, and this is the way I start most of my writing. The second one's turning out a bit this way as well. I tend to write the first 10,000 words fairly blind, so I just write into the abyss, and I just sit down and try to get a few chapters out with those central characters, and I will rewrite it multiple times over and over until I feel like I've got the voice. And if I've got the voice, then I can stop and I will start to map out a structure and a plot. So I've actually at least written 10,000 words before I start to do anything with the plot. Because if I get the voice right, then the characters and the story will come. So I then tend to write a fairly meticulous plot structure, which I then end up not using at all. So it's a complete waste of time, but I'm doing it again, even though I made that mistake the first time round. I'm not sure why. I think it gives me a sense of hope. I will work out what I'm doing and where this is going. So I tend to write a plot and then not stick to it. So I try to get a first draft out, and when the first draft is done, then I go back and I replot again, because it's a bit like a puzzle at that point, and there might be some good stuff there and you have to move the chapters around to make it work. Because I know writers, I mean, Jane Harper very famously talks about her meticulous plotting, how she writes these huge outlines for every chapter so she doesn't waste a word. And God bless her, like, hats off to Jane, but the number of words I waste, I just, wouldn't even want to know. It's just heartbreaking. I've wasted all the words and more. Like, I write a lot of words that don't end up in the actual book.
But darlings.
I've killed that many darlings. But, I think that's where I get to the good stuff, and I think that's where, because the writing is very character-driven, I just have to write everything about them, their backstories.
So if we went into your office or your study or where you work, would it look like a serial killing from an 80s show, an 80s with lines going and things, or would you not even have that?
No, I do spreadsheets. I'm a bit like anal in that way. I like a good Excel spreadsheet, to be honest. So I'm not the big post-it note. Like, I do have a few post-it notes, but what you would see...
So you don't have the string going?
No, but you see in the back of the cupboard, like, 50 drafts, and that's... And, I should take out shares in Officeworks because I printed out that many of them. So I don't get it right first time. It's probably a couple of drafts in before I'm really working it out. But I spend a lot of time on that first 10,000 words and almost try to perfect that at a sentence level to get the voice. Because the voice is everything, really.
Great. Well, Fiona, you've written 37 books, so you can teach us all something, can't you, about process?
Because every single book has a different process, in a manner of speaking. Of all those 37 books, there's only been one where I have had a downloaded, brilliant image of how to start the book. So normally I have no clue where the book starts. I start with theme, but what I also do is, and this pertains to all of us, whatever we believe about ourselves, and we often believe things that are completely incorrect, and I think the easiest example of that is someone who's anorexic. They look in the mirror and they see a huge person, and we look at them and, we're very concerned because they're overly thin. So, whatever you believe about yourself influences everything you say, everything you do, and how you behave in any given situation. So I always know that about my characters because I may not know what's going to happen in the scene, and I may not know where the direction the book's going, but I sure as heck know how my characters will behave, so I can drop them in absolutely anywhere. The Money Club was very plot-driven. That was about a Ponzi scheme. So that was the first book in a long time that I actually had a real structure of what I wanted to do. But often they're more loose like this. I start off with the theme and then I choose the characters and I work with it. Don't despair, but I have no idea where the book's really going until I've written 65,000 words. And then that's normally round about January, and I clear off the kitchen bench. And what I've done is every time a character has said something or done something that is driving the story forward, I highlight it in a particular colour for each character. And then I pull that out and I put that into a document. And then I read all that. And that is the very first time in the book, we're about halfway, that then I start to see scenes. I go, okay, yeah, I have to do that scene, that scene, that scene, that scene. And the second half of the first half of the book is awful. I hate it. I never know what I'm doing. I dump more words than I keep. But once I get to about that 60 to 70,000 words, it's like I've climbed the hill and hopefully set things up. And it's not a skate by any means. Every word is hard wrought. But I've got far more of a plan and I can see the picture for the rest of the book and I will know where I'm going. Except this is the first book that I didn't see an ending. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to... Well, I knew what I wanted to do with the ending, but I let readers' voices, imaginary voices, get in my head and get in the way, because what happens part of the ending I thought was not going to go down well with my readership, and I was wrong. I wasted all that angst for nothing.
Now that's interesting to me. That's
really got in the way.
But that is interesting. So do you have the reader's voice in your ear?
Not normally, but because I was doing something that I knew a lot of women, and 90% of my readers are women, I knew there were a lot of women who weren't going to approve of how I finished the book. So,
and did you feel them sort of telling you off?
I did. Yes, absolutely.
And it made you hesitate?
Yeah, absolutely.
How interesting.
It really did. And so then my editor said, da-da-da-da-da, I won't say which character. And I said, I know, because I knew what I wanted to do, but I just was a bit hesitant about doing it. And we had a big chat, and then I just went and did what I wanted to do. Which I should have done. And it was totally my fault. I mean, but it really, and it's the first time that's ever happened, but it really got in the way.
Oh, okay, it's great. Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Vikki? Do you have readers' voices in your head or publishers or any?
There's no room in there for any more voices, I can tell you. Obviously, I have a lot of respect for Penny, and I know that we've worked together over a number of books now, but honestly, I don't hear anyone until it's ready, and I don't even send the manuscript to Penny until I've gone over it. It's almost done, I think, and I've done as much as I can do. That said, I've also changed an ending because I've considered readers' expectations early, but I don't do that anymore because you can't please
How did that
everybody.
make you feel to do that? Was it against what you wanted to do?
This was quite a while ago. This was my first book, and I'm nearly 8 books in now, and I feel differently about changing it. But I only knew what I knew then, and there wasn't anything I could do. But yeah, I genuinely did overthink a lot of stuff and think that I owed the reader something. But now I am focused on story. I owe myself to follow through whatever fired me up about the story in the beginning, to follow it through right to the end. And if that's where it ends, that's where it ends. But yeah, it is funny because you kind of, I don't know, it's a learning experience, that's for sure. And every book, you're right, the process is different with every book. I think I've nailed something and then it goes and changes. And there's no real solid grasp that I have on how I do what I do. Otherwise, I would replicate it every time, but I can't. It's just very... Everyone's different. Yeah. I'm so impressed to hear the plotting thing, because I can't plot to save my life. So...
Do you know, though, I'm beginning to think, now that the more writers I speak to at things like this as well, that actual real plotters like Jane Harper are actually in the minority. The main writers that I speak to are people who are a bit more loose with their plot lines to begin with anyway. And I thought that was it. When I first started writing, I thought, everyone must be different to me. Everyone must have, fully planned out like Jane Harper. But no, it seems like it's quite a big group of us.
Sure. So the other thing I wanted to say too was every book is different. The hard part is always in a different spot. So when people say, you bash them out and there's a formula, well, no, it's not. Because every story has its own challenges and every story has its own difficult bit. And I suppose when I first started writing, I would say I was a plotter, but now I generally have 3 or 4 big scenes in my head and I've got no idea how to get to them.
Right. Yep. What about you, Christine?
Look, I think I'm somewhere in the middle, and what you're saying, Margaret, about most writers maybe don't plot. I think a lot of us are... people ask if you're a plotter or a pantser, so many of us are somewhere in between. You do a bit of both. And even Jane Harper, I know that she spends about a year thinking about the book before she starts plotting, so she's doing that in her head at least, So most people don't just sit down and whack out a whole book, just see what comes to me this morning. There's a lot of... you're writing when you're not writing a lot of the time. Like, you're writing when you're stacking the dishwasher, or I just spent so much time with this book because it was during lockdowns, walking the dog and working through in my head what's going wrong here, what's going right, what's going to happen next, you know. You think about it a lot, and then you might make little notes to yourself, and that's when the good stuff sometimes comes. So it's actually really hard to explain, I think. Sometimes the process questions are interesting, and they're certainly interesting to other writers, but they also can be quite hard to explain, to put it in a box of I do it this way or I do it this way. Yeah, unless you're Stephen King, who does it the same way every time. Oh, he's famous. He's got you need to read his book on writing. It's a wonderful book because it's not just about writing, but it's slightly autobiographical as well. Well, he writes a first draft in 4 months and says you shouldn't spend longer than 4 months. But he's made like $1 gazillion, and he writes. I like Stephen King, but he pretty much writes the same book every time. It's set in the same place, and it's usually about a male writer. So he's not out doing a lot of research, you know. So he writes the first draft straight through, 4 hours a day for 4 months, and with the door closed, and then he edits with the door open. So, but it's a good book to read, but most of us aren't Stephen King.
No, I don't think I'm Stephen King. And I think that, I mean, there's a luxury there, isn't there, of saying you can write with the door closed. Like, come on, who can do that?
That's a boy thing.
That's a boy thing, and it's also probably a money thing as well. I once read a thing that Tim Winton said his favourite, and you know I love Tim Winton's book, but they said his favourite place to write and way to write, he said his ideal place is 10 metres underground in a concrete vault. That's what he dreams of, but he says his writing office is something like that. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, give me a break. Does he? You know, he's what? You know, that's money and mail.
Can I add something? I remember reading something. It was probably when I was stuck with this book at some point. Some white male writer had written something about his process, and his process was, you know, get up and meditate for an hour and then write for 5 hours uninterrupted and all of this. And so I think I wrote something back. I don't know if it was on Instagram or maybe I was still on Twitter back then before Elon Musk bought it, and I went, see you later. And I wrote about my process, which was write 10 minutes in the car on my phone while I'm dropping off my daughter at athletics, and then write 10 minutes when I get home before someone asks me to find their school bag. And then, you know, it's just completely interrupted snippets. It's such a luxury for someone to lecture to others about how to do their process when often it is a man.
Or from a place
of privilege.
What are you all? I know you're all writing and you have different sort of contractual agreements and with your writing and so forth. But can you tell us just before we head to the break what you're working on now and what we can be excited about, because we're all going to buy these books in the break, but then what we can be excited about afterwards. Christine, what about you? Debut author. What's next?
Don't get too excited. It's probably going to take a long time because I tend to take a long time.
What's a long time?
2 years.
Okay, it's not too bad. I'll only be 54.
Yeah, I don't really like to talk about work in progress that much when it's not that far progressed. I mean,
but you have got.
I have got. Right. Yeah, I'm writing another standalone. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I hit a creative wall after putting out 8 books in 8 years, so I took a bit of time off, but I've just gone back to writing, and I have a title which I often don't have, and it's called The Drowning. And it opens with a dead body, and they may have drowned. And my premise, and I'm only 20,000 words in, but the premise is this. 4 adult siblings and a third cousin have inherited a holiday house.
Oh, that's a good one.
So someone wants to sell it, someone wants to keep it exactly as the 1960s shack that it is.
Right.
Someone wants to raise it, and and it's in this small town down on the coast that's just starting to be noticed because Lorne's a bit full, so they're moving a bit further down the coast. So and I've got 3 big scenes that I know what's going to happen.
So what will be the themes?
That's what I said before. Remember, my husband had come and I'd say 8 books, and I always start with a theme. This time I've got a dead body and no theme. But no, that's not true. I have a very messy family.
Wow.
And that, I think, is the theme.
Maybe the theme could be negative gearing.
Maybe. But I did actually write Birthright, which was my family behaving badly. Where there's a will, there's a relative novel. Not a crime novel. And maybe I've just taken it a step further. But, it also involves a small town and things. But, yeah, I don't know what the social issue is. Probably money. Vikki?
I'm always writing more than one thing, but I do publish quite slowly. I'm sure Penny would like me to hurry up a little bit, but I tend to, each book I've written takes me 3 or 4 years, but I'm publishing more frequently because I'm writing more than one book, so it's, I don't know, whatever works for you. But I'm writing another crime novel, which is, I'm deep into research at the moment, which is fascinating, but also a bit of a wormhole. And another young adult novel, and something else that might be memoir-ish. I don't really know.
You're working on 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's because I get
that's another panel
bored
as
with
well.
myself.
Because how do you manage that, Vikki? It's incredible.
Well, not well. No, I think I need to be able to hop between things if I'm bored with myself, or I'm frustrated, or I'm just, I'm not, because I don't plan, I have to think a lot about things, and when the thinking's not going well, then I'll jump to something else. And
pretty soon we're going to stop for a break, but I just want to ask each of you really quickly, what are you reading now? What are you reading, Christine?
At the moment, I'm reading another debut author, and it's a memoir. It's not a crime novel. So I'm reading Ariane Beeson's book, which is a memoir about motherhood and madness. So it's about her experience after having her child of ending up in a mother-baby unit. Because I'm not myself, you see. It's a fabulous book, and I met Ariane at the Williamstown Literary Festival a couple of weeks ago. It's good. I recommend.
Fiona?
I interviewed Ariane in Geelong. It was a fabulous talk. My book group. I'm reading my book group novel, which is Gentleman in Moscow.
Because I'm flaky, I'm reading about 5 books.
Amazing, Vikki.
It's not amazing at all. It's flaky. I just pick up whatever I feel like at the time. So yeah, I've got a mixture of kids' books, young adult books, serious literature, and I'm about 94 pages through every one of them.
Hats off. All right, everybody. Thank you. We're not saying goodbye to our panellists yet, so don't feel sad. You will get a chance to see them again and to ask questions. But for now, I'm going to announce the break. And just remember, really importantly, the raffle tickets are for sale. Now, they're $2 each or 3 for $5. You can't get a better bargain than that anywhere. Prizes are a good... What's that?
Hasn't changed since 1991.
There you go. Hasn't changed since 19... How's that for inflation? Take that. Take that, treasurer. Prizes are, of course, a good selection of crime books. We have the wonderful Sun bookstall sellers over there looking fabulous. They have a 10% discount for members, and all authors are happy to sign their books. At the reception desk, you can join or rejoin Sisters in in crime, grab a free bookmark, and when you get home, sign up as a supporter so that you receive event notifications in our monthly e-newsletter, A Stab in the Dark. You can also buy tote bags, t-shirts, mugs, pens, and wait, there's more, magnetic clips. Scarlet Stiletto, a second cut, plus the new collection, the Scarlet Stiletto 30 Years of Murder, Mystery and Malice, edited by Vice President Lindy Cameron. Wave your hand, Lindy. It's a collection of 31 amazing stories, and there's a special prize tonight. Members and new members are $28, non-members $32. It's a big book, and it normally retails for $36. Let's have a break, and we'll join soon. Start thinking about some fabulous questions for these panellists. Thank you. Questions to ask our panel. So now is your chance to really ask really get into it and ask what your burning question. And when you do have a question, actually we'll just see who would like to be first. Who has a question they'd really like to ask? Well, this is awkward.
That's all right, we can keep talking.
Wow. Oh, no, it always takes a while, but we do have one. Yes, please. What's your name, please?
My name's Avril.
Avril, could you please go over to Kelly, and you'll start with Kelly. Now, remembering that Sarah has the very difficult job of thinking about the best question, and there is a prize.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
Yeah.
Hello. One of the things that strikes me so much in crime writing, especially coming out of Australia and New Zealand, is how significant the setting is, the place. And I know we talked about that earlier, but how important is it for you to be in those locations yourself to evoke the depth you need to in your writing to then pass that on to your readers so they feel that they're there with your characters?
Great question. Who wants to go first?
Do you want to go, Christine?
Sure.
That's a great question. Interestingly, so my book was written, the first draft and then really the redraft, mostly through 2020 and 2021, and it's set in Queensland, and I live in Yarraville. So there wasn't a lot of going anywhere. And when I was writing it, we actually had my lovely husband, who's sitting up the back, and I every year or two actually go up to Queensland because I'm originally from Brisbane, and we'd planned a family holiday in Noosa with our kids, which of course didn't happen because of lockdowns. And I'd planned to go there to the place where my book is set to take some photos and just spend a bit of time there, and of course that couldn't happen. So I actually wrote the community entirely from memory, sitting in our study downstairs with a corkboard in front of me with a few photos of myself in that location when I was 20, swimming in that waterhole, and I had a picture of the community hall, which features in the book, which is a real hall, and then I had photos of what I imagined Lars's house would look like, and I did print out a photo of the pub in the town, which was a true-to-life picture. So I wrote the whole thing from memory. And when I was shortlisted for the Banjo Prize in 2022, it coincided with that holiday that we had delayed for 2 years in Noosa. And we drove on the way there through Yandina because I wanted to stop there. And I wanted to drive to where I'd set the book, to the Starlight community, which is only about 10 minutes drive from there. And it was the most surreal experience. We stopped, if you've read the book, there's a scene where Lars's daughter arrives on the train, which is across the road from the pub, and he's standing in the street, and there's a motorbike that comes into town, so it's someone from the Outlaws motorcycle gang, and he rocks up in his leathers. And I kid you not, we parked at the train station in front of the pub, and a motorbike came around the corner at someone in leathers. I think he was in the Rebels colours. And I got out my phone and videoed him when he was getting back on his bike and driving away. Then we walked into that pub, which looked exactly how I remembered it, sat down and had a beer, and then we drove to the community straight to the hall. And on the way in, there was a burnt out car by the side of the road with the police tape around it. And my husband was like, you got to get out and take a photo of that. Like, the whole thing was like a movie unfolding in front of my eyes that was reflecting what I'd already written, because normally you write what you've just seen, and I was actually seeing what I'd already written.
It's like Black Mirror.
But I think it's very important to at least have visited the place that you write about or spend some significant time there. But because I'd grown up in Queensland, I could do it pretty well. But my second book is set down here in on the coast of Victoria, in a place close to where we have a house, and we spend quite a bit of time there. And yeah, I think hopefully this time round I won't get stuck in lockdown again.
Well, I would support that. Given that I spent barely 90 minutes in York and decided to set a book there, it was very challenging, right? Because I wasn't able to pop back. So, but I always visit the place and we spend a couple of days. We go out on a road trip. The first place you always go is the community notice board at the IGA and the neighbourhood house, because you get a real sense of your community there. You'll see, what's on, and you look at who needs a ride to Melbourne, or who's selling bees, or you get a real sense of the community for that. I took it a step further in the Money Club, which is set down in a fictitious Koroit, and I was having there's an Irish festival. I don't know if you're familiar with Koroit. So the Irish landed in Port Fairy, which was then called Belfast, in about 1850, and they must have lucked out. It must have been a really wet summer, and it was really green, and they said, oh, it looks like Ireland. And they didn't move very far at all. They just stayed and planted potatoes, and and then they brought over the love of steeplechasing, and the Money Club is about a Ponzi scheme. It's all connected with racing. So I needed to set it in a community that had gambling in its DNA, that they wouldn't even question taking a punt on anything. So, and I was familiar, but what happened was I had this Irish festival that I'd written. So I took myself off to the Koroit Irish Festival, which is just after we'd come out of lockdown. It was very little, because I went back this year and it was enormous. And anyway, I decided that, I'd embrace the whole thing, and so I entered the soda bread baking competition, and I'd never made a loaf of soda bread, and so I googled soda bread because I didn't know what it was, and I learnt what it was, and there was this recipe, and it was called Grandma's soda bread. So I made it, and we rock up to drop it off, and the first thing I'm asked is it in the traditional, the non-traditional category? I'm like, I said, well, it's got raisins in it. That's probably, I'm thinking that'd be rich, the rich Irish. So I said, I'll be non-traditional. So anyway, I enter that. Well, I won. It was a little. So then they asked me to, they interviewed me and tell us about. I said, well, it was Grandma's recipe. I upset the local CWA, and but it was absolutely fantastic. And at the end of the book, but that was, I actually had that story because we were in lockdown when I wrote the first draft, and I wrote the Irish Festival. Then we went to the Irish Festival before it got edited, and I said to my husband, gosh, it was bigger in my head than it was. And we went back last year, and it was because it was just after COVID. They were just coming back. But, you to experience the potato eating competition and the potato peeling competition and the music and all that, you get it. I'm not very imaginative, so it's much easier for me to see something and write that. And I'll stop talking. But so in Home Fires, the book starts it's nestled deep in the Otways, and if you've ever been to Triplet Falls, that's exactly where I got the idea to start the book. When you're standing there in the mist, smelling the peat. So yeah, it's super important, I think, to know. And I mean, there's humidity. I got hot reading your book. I was constantly sweaty because the humidity just rises off the pages in the community, and the river is just, I wanted to go back to the Murray, you know, so knowing that knowledge, it really does help. You can't know knowledge. Knowing the setting helps.
Yeah, I agree. I don't seem to be able to write about anything without being really close to it. Probably the weirdest thing I did was go to the Grampians and sit down in one spot for most of the day to see how long it took for the sun to come above one peak and drop behind the other, so that I could have a clear picture of how much daylight there is in a town that's engulfed by, you know, monolithic structures. And I'm sure the locals were just ready to have me carted away. But I did buy an ice cream, and that I made one friend. But COVID has a lot to answer for, you know, because, I mean, this book took me three and a half years to write, and the river is a changing environment and changed so much during the writing of this. I had a research trip planned on a houseboat, and that of course got cancelled, and then we had the terrible floods that came through. So sometimes you experience a setting and then you find that it just changes on you and it switches up and it becomes something different in the story. So I actually had to alter the whole timeline for this book because of what that river did and what COVID did. So yeah, we adjust.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Someone's got a question. Oh yes, we do have one. Yes, if you could go to Kelly, please. Thank you. And please say your name, state your name and occupation. No, just your name. Just your name.
My name's Kim. I'd like to ask, I know stories and you don't always have a plot in mind, but what's the attraction to crime writing versus other genres?
There is no other genre.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I think I've kind of moved into adult crime. I don't really know how I got here, but I'm always telling stories about bad people doing good things and good people doing bad things. So it feels like I just am continuing in that tradition, but from a different perspective.
I've kind of fallen into it. When I wrote The Money Club, so I'm from Geelong and we have the dubious honour of being hit by two of the biggest Ponzi schemes in the country. I lived through Graham Hoy, who ripped the town off to $88 million and caused a micro-recession in Geelong. And I'd been in the back of my head for ages, and when I pitched the book about 3 years ago to my publisher, and HarperCollins is based in Sydney, so they all said, oh, you're talking about Melissa Caddick, because her foot had just turned up. And I said, no, she only ripped off to 33 million. So, and then about 12 years after Graham Hoy ripped us off, someone else had another go. He was based in Torquay. And so I decided I wanted to write a book about a Ponzi scheme, which is a crime, but I wasn't interested. The media always, if you Google Ponzi scheme 60 minutes when you get home, it's remarkable. There's Ponzi schemes I've never even heard about. There's some in Western Australia. And anyway, the media always focus on the perpetrator, on the scam artist, and the luxurious lifestyle, you know, the yacht at the bottom of Yarra Street and the driving around town in the Gold Rolls Royce and the luxury houses and all that. And I wanted to look at the everyday people and what happens when one day you've got everything and the next day you've lost the lot. and money again brings out the best and the worst in us. So that's how I fell into writing about crime. So it was not necessarily a decision, but it sold really well. So then I thought, well, maybe I should keep going.
I never planned to write a crime novel. It just sort of happened. In fact, I wanted to write literary fiction, and I'm not sure that I will just solidly write crime novels, although it seems that the next one is in that bent as well, so maybe I do have a dark mind. I mean, I'm not necessarily attracted to crime. The crime itself is not that interesting. I think there's various ways that you can do it, but, you know, if you've read enough crime novels, there's plenty of small towns with big secrets, and you wonder if there's actually any secrets left. I think that the crime genre lends itself to a lot of interesting investigation into the various ways that human beings interact, conduct themselves, what drives people. So I just kind of fell into it as well, I think. It wasn't the plan, but I'm happy to write crime. I certainly enjoy reading it. But I don't think that much about genre when I start out.
I think I realised I was a bit flippant earlier, because when I think back and I look at my bookshelf, it's full of crime. And I've been reading it since I was in my teens, and and I look back at some of those awful mouldy dog-eared books and think that I still can't part with them, so clearly something stuck. I think it's just and still, to this day, I'm still looking for crime series when I'm watching TV. I'm obsessed with it. So, yeah, I'm probably a bit of a crime tragic for a long time.
We might have time for thank you very much. We might have time for one more quick question and quick answers. So have we got one more? Is there one here? Excellent. Yes, and then we'll just have quick answers.
Many. I'm interested in why, when most Australians live in the cities, are they interested in rural, crime? And also, why you're interested in rural crime and in the city? Why isn't it set in St Kilda, for example?
Well, I live in a regional city, so I fly the flag for small town Australia, because I do live, the road is called the Melbourne Road, and,
Sorry, because of the fudge.
Sorry, what am I trying to say? I think that I write rural fiction because I fly the flag for rural people, because it is a very different day-to-day experience living out of a major capital city. There you go. I'm just going to pop my hand up because I am a country person, and for all of my 48 years, I have lived in small country towns, like less than 5,000. And it's a question that a lot of country people ask, actually. Why are so many people writing about small country towns? But small country towns are great places. Like, I'm not surprised. It's really interesting. A lot of people are asking that in the country.
I think people write it because it's a contained setting. So if you're writing in that genre, it lends itself to writing crime. But there's a lot of great crime books that are not rural crime, and like a big plug, if anyone's interested in reading a good crime novel that's a recent one that's come out this year, is Ian Ryan's The Strip, which is set on the Gold Coast, and that's my book of the year. Like, definitely read Ian's book. It's quite different. It's sort of hard-boiled noir, much more sort of American style of crime writing than the typical Australian sort of rural noir. Peter Temple's book Truth, which is a literary masterpiece, is set in a city. So, there's plenty of good crime novels that aren't set in rural towns. But, yeah, I think it's because of the contained setting. I think we are attracted to, and they sell internationally, that concept of what Australia is, which maybe isn't that reflective often of what Australia actually is. I was looking for something different when I wrote The Community, which is why I set it in sort of tropical, subtropical Queensland rather than the outback or your typical small country town. But yeah, that's not to say I really enjoy reading books set in small towns. Yeah, I think there's a lot more diversity in crime writing out there than when we think about it, we realise it, but we often jump to sort of thinking that it's all a bit same.
Yeah, it does seem to be about rural noir at the moment, but I don't think that I think it's just anything that gives you a sense of isolation and how big Australia really is and how small we are and how easily we can get lost. If it nails that, then it's a good story for me.
That's great. Well, thank you. I think that's it for we need to finish up. And Sarah, thank you, Kelly. And Sarah, would you please announce your best question for the night? They were all good.
It's really hard because there are only 3 questions. It's really hard because there are only 3 questions, so I kind of feel like I'm being really sort of disloyal here. Avril, I thought was a brilliant question about the significance of setting, particularly given what we're here to talk about tonight. I thought Kim's question was really good. Where's Kim? Because, over here. Oh, that's right. Because, as we know, Fiona has had an extensive career in romance before she came over to the dark side. So it's like, and she's not the only one. If you look at romance authors, there are many romance authors that have come over to the dark side. The very famous Liz Fielding in the UK. I don't know how many books she's written. 100? Over 100.
Oh, well over.
Well over 100. Now she's now writing crime. But I think I'm going to have to give it to Minnie, I'm afraid. And to be honest, Minnie, you're getting it not for your question, but you're going to get the prize, but for Vikki's answer. I thought Vikki's answer was really good about not getting lost. Yes. That whole thing about, I think a lot of us in the cities, we don't go out the bush because it's frightening. It's really frightening. We're used to busy, bustling streets, and you go out bush and there's nothing there. And it's like, who am I? And I could get lost here easily. So Minnie wins. Yeah, Minnie wins for Vikki's answer.
Oh, Christine's book. Is that the one set up at Threadbow? I think because she said we were in a talk together, she definitely set one up at Threadbow.
At least I don't have to write down her address because she's my neighbour. Next door. Next door. Next door.
Then Barton entered the following year, and then this year.
There you go. Is that Christine? All right.
Okay, everybody. We are now going to present. It's present time, everyone's favourite time, or the people who are receiving the presents, it's their favourite time. So Carmel is going, and as Carmel is doing that, will I read this out, or are you going to? Oh, okay.
I'm reading it out because we don't need to do it because it's a...
Okay.
Can you wrap it up first then, and then Carmel can do her bit, please?
Right. Okay, so which bits are wrapping up it?
Thanking everyone and saying...
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vikki Wakefield, for being such a wonderful guest and an author to the river. Thank you, Fiona Lowe, for your wonderful writing skills and for coming all the way from Geelong. And thank you, Christine. And Christine, well done on your debut. It's just wonderful. And thank you to me. I'm so happy. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Well done.